We have a running theme, a running thread of faith in all of these readings. I'll talk about faith, and in the middle I'll talk about the priesthood, as of course it relates to faith, but there's also something pressing in our diocese right now. In the first reading we hear from the prophet Habakkuk, "How long, O Lord, I cry for help, but you do not listen. I cry out to you violence, but you do not intervene. Why do you let me see ruin? Why must I look at misery?" See, if we hear this in the context of faith, we might immediately think, if we have an erroneous understanding of faith, we might immediately think, this man has lost faith. This man Habakkuk has lost faith. He's here complaining to God. He's here saying that he's crying out to the Lord and the Lord is not listening. He doesn't have an optimistic view of the future, we could say. Why do you let me see ruin? Why must I look at misery? Don't you have faith, Habakkuk? Don't you have faith that the Lord is going to change these things and the Lord is going to give you a better future, a brighter future? See, we have two main misunderstandings of faith. The primary one, probably not as present in our communities, more out in the secular world, sees faith as something like optimism. Faith means to just have a positive view about things and a positive prediction that good things will happen in the future. That's what they mean, those Christians. That's what those Christians mean when they say faith. And they might even put a negative spin on that and say that that's just blind superstition. If that's what we mean by faith, then yes, Habakkuk has lost all faith here. Or maybe something that's maybe more common within our Catholic communities, within our Christian communities, is something like just trusting in the future. So it's positive, it's trusting that the Lord will bring about the future, but it has to do with the future. I have faith that something that I want to happen is going to happen in the future. Again, if that's what we think faith means, then yes, Habakkuk has lost faith. If that's not what faith is, then what is it? We can put it this way. Faith is to have, to develop, to lean into more and more a living relationship with the true God, with the living and loving God. And a relationship that is based on reality, not based on the future, based on the present. To get to know the Lord for who He is now, in the present moment. To discover Him. To approach Him as we would approach someone whom we want to get to know. A friend, perhaps a potential spouse. Those things are not primarily based on predictions about the future. And married couples will tell us that maybe they had some predictions about the future when they first got to know each other. But if they really developed their relationship with each other in a way that allowed them to be free, to be authentic, they had to let go of those predictions about the future. They had to let those layers be shed so that they could love the other person for who they are, not for one's own projection about who they should be, but for who they are in the present. And this is the same lens for us to encounter the Lord. Not who we think the Lord should be or what He should do for us or how we want the future to be, but who He is in the present. To have this focus, this direction, this orientation. And the flip side of that coin refers to us. To not relate to the Lord as an idealized version of ourselves. This is who I should be, therefore this is how I'm going to try to present myself to God. This is how I want to be in the future, therefore that's how I'm going to tell Him that I am and what I think and what I want and what I feel. No. To be completely bare, vulnerable, open, to tear off our garments, so to speak, and to expose ourselves before Him. This is faith. Because when we do that, what we discover is a God who loves us, is a God who is there to catch us, is a God who is there to be with us in our pain, in our misery, in our imperfections, in our struggles, in our stumblings. Not one who is waiting for us to overcome all of that before he starts loving us. No. One who is there now. With this lens, listen again to the prophet Habakkuk. How long, O Lord, I cry for help, but you do not listen. I cry out to you violence, but you do not intervene. The point here is not that he has lost, quote unquote, faith, that he's got a negative perspective. The point is, who is he saying this to? The content is being totally open, totally honest, totally vulnerable. But he's not sinking in bitterness and complaining and resentment. Who is he saying this to? He's saying this to God. He is praying. He is exercising faith. How long, O Lord, I cry for help, but you do not listen. I cry out to you violence, but you do not intervene. And surely we could correct him. We can say, no, God does listen, Habakkuk. You shouldn't say you do not listen. God does listen. But what is Habakkuk's experience? He's experiencing a God who does not listen. A little like Jesus, the Son of God himself, on the cross cried out to the Father, Father, why have you forsaken me? Was Jesus wrong in saying that? Jesus, even the Son of God, the second person of the Trinity, was experiencing loneliness, abandonment from the Father. And he was crying out, Father, why have you forsaken me? And he was quoting the psalm, yes, and we need to know where the psalm ends. But the point is the prayer in the present moment. That's faith. And we can do the same. We can approach the Lord with this total vulnerability. We can cry out to him. We can tell him exactly what we're going through. And we can tell him, God. By doing this, we grow in faith. In the second reading, we hear from St. Paul writing to Timothy. He says, I remind you to stir into flame the gift of God that you have through the imposition of my hands. The imposition of my hands. Of course, the way by which holy orders, ordination, priesthood has been passed down from generation to generation. From Jesus to his apostles, and then from his apostles to the next generation and the next generation, all the way down to our Bishop Peter, an unbroken line of succession to our Bishop Peter, and then to our priests today. The laying on of hands. We have a difficult situation right now where we have a shortage of priests. We've had a shortage of priests for a long time. In 1960, the ratio of Catholics to priests, or priests to Catholics, used to be 1 to 1,000. 1 priest to 1,000 Catholics. Now in the United States, the ratio is 1 to 2,500. 1 priest to 2,500 Catholics. In Idaho, 7 years ago, when we did this study, we had 1 priest for 4,500 Catholics in Idaho. So twice as big or as small, depending on how you're measuring it, than the national average. Twice worse, as bad as the national average. Well, we know in the last few years, tons of people have come into Idaho, thanks be to God, and most of them, or many of them, Catholics, thanks be to God. But not many priests have come out of these communities, of our families. And now, we've imported priests from other countries, from Nigeria and India and other places, in order to try to alleviate some of this. And we have 22 foreign-born priests who are here on pieces. And now, because of something that happened in the previous presidential administration and it's not being changed in the current one, maybe it will, we're praying that it will, but we don't know what will happen in the future. We're exposing our hearts to the Lord, asking Him to intervene, but whether or not He does, that's according to His will. But what's going to happen is, in the next year, 10 of those priests are going to be asked to leave the country for at least 1 year, and then be invited to reapply, and maybe they'll be accepted, maybe not. So we're going to lose 10 priests. East Idaho, for example, they're going to lose 50% of their priests. So the whole diocese is going to have to rally together and see how we're going to handle this, especially how we're going to handle the situation in East Idaho. And likely priests will be moved to East Idaho, at least for the next year. I think I'm safe. I was just moved from East Idaho, so I think I'm okay. But if not, I'll have to say yes, Bishop. I'll serve you and the church and the Lord however I'm asked. But the point here is we have to start asking a deeper question. Why? Why do we have such a stark shortage of priests? And there are many reasons, of course, and I'm not going to try to answer that fully here, not that I know the fullness of the answer anyways. And there are reasons that are beyond our control. But I was at a breakfast at one time with a group of gentlemen, and they were sharing with me their concerns that priests get moved around a lot, and they were just saying, we wish priests could stay put here, wherever it was, for a longer period of time. And of course I said, me too, I want to be here. If it were up to me, I'd be here in Caldwell for the next 200 years. But then I asked them, let's just think about this a little bit. Let's just pull back a layer. How many siblings do each of you have? 5, 10, these were wiser, I won't say older, these are wiser gentlemen. 5, 10, 15 siblings, okay. How many of them became priests? None of them. All right. How many children did you have together, collectively? 10, 20, 25 children, adding all of them together? Okay, how many of them became priests? None. Okay, how many grandchildren do you have? 30, 40, 50? Okay, how many of them have become priests? None. Why is it that we are not growing priests, we're not developing priests, that priests are not coming from our families? Yes, there are parish programs that we can implement, and I'll mention something that is coming soon, but what is going on in the family life? And I'll just give one little anecdote to try to move us in this direction. Friends of mine who have 8 children, and my friends are just a couple years younger than me, and they're likely, God willing, going to have more. But maybe their 5th or 6th child, who is 4 years old, is showing signs that he's just really devoted to the Lord and to prayer. All of their children are really, but this one in particular is attentive to the priesthood, it seems. And the mom stopped at the Adoration Chapel one day, brought all the kids to the Adoration Chapel, and they were just there in prayer for a few minutes. And of course, some of the kids being rowdy, but others being more prayerful, more contemplative. And she was trying to teach each one of them to express their hearts to the Lord. To say, okay, let's tell Jesus we love him. Jesus, I love you. Okay, let's tell Jesus who we want to pray for. Jesus, I want to pray for my grandma, my cousin, etc. Okay, Jesus, let's ask him what we need. Okay, children, let's ask Jesus what we need. Okay, I need this and that. And then she noticed that this one boy, the 4-year-old, was really captivated by the Eucharist, just looking up, really attentive. And then she said, between periods of silence, hopefully we're starting to appreciate the periods of silence that we're bringing into the liturgy. Not that we're inventing that, that's what the church asks us to do, precisely for this reason, so we can encounter the Lord in our own hearts. She says to him, you can tell Jesus whatever you want. You can tell him whatever you want. And he stopped. And then he looked at her and asked, "Can I tell him I want to be a priest?" She said, yes, you can tell him. Tell him you want to be a priest. He said, okay. Got back into his little 4-year-old mind and heart and told him, Jesus, I want to be a priest. Whatever's going on there, we want to cultivate, we want to guard, we want to shelter. Pope Benedict said that if we can teach our young people to pray, we can be certain that they will know what to do with God's call. It all comes back to this. The Lord has never stopped calling people to the priesthood. Why is it that us in the last 7 years have stopped listening to him, have stopped having the courage, the opportunities, the encouragement to pursue this call? This call, which is, by the way, for men. I'm talking about religious sisters, religious life another time. But the call to be a warrior, that's the call of the priest. Just like God is a warrior, yes, he's compassionate, but the scriptures describe him as being a stern warrior from the book of wisdom. God who is willing to lay his life down for the salvation of his people, to liberate them from sin. This is for men, for strong men, not for perfect men, for men who recognize their weakness, who recognize that they can do absolutely nothing without God. And the moment they start praying, the moment they stop praying, stop begging the Lord for mercy and for help and for courage and for virtue, that's the moment they start going astray and into sin, because they cannot do anything by themselves. So certainly not for self-made men, not for self-righteous men, but nonetheless, for men, for courageous men, for men who are willing to lay their lives down for something bigger than themselves, for men who are willing to lay their lives down for the salvation of others, and also for men who are willing and interested and desiring in becoming one with Christ the priest, most intimately, most personally. So it's time for us it's been time for a long time, but we haven't felt it because we've been importing foreign priests to help alleviate our shortage. These have been band-aids, we can say. But now that band-aid's going to be taken off. And we're going to really feel, even more so than we already are, the shortage. And so we want to approach this question with humility and to let go of our attachments, to let go of our biases, and to say, okay, God, maybe some things that we've been doing, not everything, I'm not proposing that, but maybe some things we've been doing for the last 7 years as a couple, as a family, as a neighborhood, as a parish, as a diocese, as a universal church. Maybe some things maybe have not been helping us. Maybe they've been producing some fruits in other areas, but maybe they've been discouraging our young men from pursuing the priesthood. Can we entertain that? Can we be open to that? Can we expose ourselves, expose our own attachments and our own priorities to the Lord and lay them bare at his feet and say, Jesus, I can't solve this. I ask you to take care of it. This we can do. And we're going to have to start doing it. We're going to have to do it more. And with this, I'll just say something quickly about the gospel. This all ties into the gospel with the apostle saying to the Lord, Lord, increase our faith. Lord, make me do more. Lord, increase my conviction so that I can move mountains and do more stuff. Lord, help us to bring about the positive view of the future that we want. Jesus simply corrects them, says, if you have the faith of the size of a mustard seed, you would do everything. You would move mountains and uproot this mulberry tree, etc. It's not about the size of the faith. It's not about the strength of the conviction. That's not what faith is. It's not about positive self-talk about what's going to happen in the future. It's about in whom is our faith. Is it in us? Is it in me? Is it in our own powers and abilities? Or is it in the Lord? Can we shift? Can we put our faith in Him? Can we let go of our defenses, of our own self-reliance, of our own attempts to perfect ourselves and to provide for ourselves? And can we focus more on Him? Once recently, I was praying with a man who was dying. I was administering the last rites, bringing God's mercy to him in his dying moments. And as folks usually get at those moments, very unsettled, heavy breathing. And one person in the room, well-intended, said, "Just have courage, just have courage." That didn't help him. He got a lot more restless. And then I, not knowing what to do, just trying to be faithful to the church, just continued reading the prayers of the church for these moments. And these prayers that were asking God to deliver him. Almost immediately as I began, his restlessness went away and his peace was restored. And he received God's mercy, not because of something that he did, but simply due to his humility and his availability, his helplessness, his recognition of his helplessness. He opened himself and he received God's mercy and God's grace. And yes, it's a privilege for priests to be there in those moments and to be that instrument. And I don't say this to boast. I don't say this to boast myself. I say this to really exalt the priesthood as a great gift that it is. It's something that only priests can do. Only priests can forgive sins. And only priests can consecrate the body and blood of Christ and give Jesus as food, as nourishment for us in this way, for our journey here through the Valley of Tears. So as we go forward in this Mass, we come to the Lord as we are, not as we want things to be or as we want ourselves to be, but we come to Him as we are, and we expose our hearts bare before Him, before this altar. And if we do this, and we can't do this perfectly, but if we just lean in this direction, and we take a step forward, we take a step in faith, we will encounter a God who is here to receive us. A God who is here to receive our gifts, which will be symbolically brought forward as bread and wine, and a God who is willing to send the Holy Spirit down upon those gifts and transform them into the body and blood of Christ. And then for some strange reason, He won't stop here. He will then take the body and blood of Jesus and He will give Him to us as food. God will give Himself to us as food, for us to be fed, for us to be nourished, for us to be strengthened, for us to continue on our pilgrimage to heaven.